This episode of the podcast is presented by TLP Black, a threat detection and response platform built by a team of the world's best APT researchers. Get historical passive DNS, live C2 monitoring, searchable network IOCs, curated Yara rules, and fresh malware from honeypots and crawlers every day. If you need actionable data, head to tlpblack.net. Tell them Costin sent you.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Security Conversations podcast. My guest this week is Matthias Frielingsdorf, co-founder and vice president of research at iVerify. Let's start right there, Matthias. Welcome to the show. What is iVerify? What do you guys do?
Thank you very much, Ryan. iVerify is a mobile security company. We're basically building apps for Android and iOS to detect very advanced threats. We're, let's say, a little bit more focused on the kind of like nation state attacks and the commercial spyware vendors and where we started, but we do have basically products for the entire enterprise. And we're trying to obviously aim at detecting every threat for every mobile device.
You guys are is it fair to say you're like a mobile EDR?
Yes, we're pretty much we're trying to be the first mobile EDR that exists, at least for iOS and also for Android. And we're trying to just like bring in a completely new mindset on how to do mobile security.
Let me ask a weird question right off the bat. What are you, in terms of being a mobile EDR, what are you able or unable to do because of how Apple has structured iOS? You know, this has been a conversation about Apple locking down iOS and not making it available for inspection. We've had these conversations for years on this podcast, and I'm curious from your perspective, building it, what can you and can't you do on iOS?
There's, let's say some things that I like to do when I'm explaining it. Think about iOS as a very locked down system, right? Mm-hmm. But if you have a very locked down system, it means the user is not able to do certain things on the phone or like sandbox the application. So you cannot write to the temp directory. But threat actors can do. So, and sometimes you're getting side channels or syscalls on the system that allow you to get a certain set of information about the system that is not plausible. It can only happen if someone with very high privileges started to change something on the system. And this is the entire like mindset or idea of when I started to do research into these areas. Can I find any other insights from the system that something just looks a little bit odd here and use this as a starting point? And there's quite a lot of things. So
it's not a traditional way of looking at EDR software on desktop. This is a end around way of doing it.
Yes, it's not like that. Let's say the traditional module where you have a framework like on macOS where you get all the nice data that you want to. You upload all the data. You have fancy algorithms, and then they're telling you, oh, your phone might be infected or not. We're not that close because we're lacking this kind of framework on iOS. But there is a couple of like other tricks that you can be doing in order to get a little bit more data. Something which is more closer that if you would be like plugging a phone into a Mac, and then you can definitely access way more. There's some ways that you can leverage this kind of capability on iOS as well.
What can't you do that would be ideal to make this a lot more foolproof and a lot more useful for defenders? You know what I'm talking about. There's this push and pull between folks who are saying Apple has locked it down way too much and now we can't tell if our things are infected. So what can't you do?
Well, we're not able to read contents from files on a phone. We're not able to list directories on the file system. We're not able to get a process list. We're not able to even get an application list. But if you know where certain things on the phone are, you can check if these exist or don't exist. So I can give you some examples. So we've seen threat actors using the temp directory for years to drop implants there, or even like config files. So just the Coruna hacks that we had last year. They had five or six files which were dropped into temp. Pegasus is dropping something into temp. Predator is dropping something into temp. NoClip is dropping something into temp. Everyone does this. So if Apple would have just given me permission to read the temp directory, I could have probably detected every commercial spyware sample in the last 10 years.
And what's the risk of Apple doing that? Like, what stops them from doing that? What's the explanation?
I think their explanation is around user privacy, obviously, and being able to see what the user is doing on the system or not doing on the system. It's about also opening up, let's say, security or like risk avenues for other attackers. Like we have seen it on desktops where security tools are getting attacked for getting like privilege escalation. But Apple's security on iOS is so strict they could have an entitlement that allows me just to read the contents of the temp directory, or even just enumerate the temp directory. This would have been enough for many of these IOCs. Or they could just find an entitlement that would just allow me to get a list of the running processes. If they wanted to, it's technically totally possible. It's, I would say, probably a question of if they as a company perceive the threat in the same way that other people would, and if it's worth the trade-off from a privacy perspective.
Right. So it becomes like a PR policy issue as well, right? Whether they want to acknowledge that this is a widespread problem versus a problem for these extremely sophisticated thing against these extremely targeted people. Like that's the language they're using to differentiate. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. They also changed that language.
I mean, it's clear what's happening. You mentioned Coruna, and let's pivot to that very quickly for the benefit of the audience. We're talking about two separate reports that came out this week. The first one from Google's Threat Intelligence Group, and then iVerify. You guys independently published findings on this. Coruna, Coruna, described as a powerful iOS exploit kit containing 23 exploits against 5 full chains capable of compromising iPhones running iOS 13 through iOS 17.2.1. So that's just setting it up at the very top. I'll ask the Kim Zetter question, which Kim Zetter always asks whenever these things pop up and these announcements happen, is how did you guys find this? Did you get tipped off? How does a company like iVerify figure this out?
In that particular case, someone gave us a URL and told us, can you take a look at this? It just looks fishy. And then we went to the URL. Basically, I just took a phone, I hooked it up to a network proxy, served to the URL, and then I was at some point in time seeing, and you can see actually the screenshot of the very first infection that I did in the report, where you see that
it was a tip-off. Someone gave you a URL as a tip. Got it.
Yes. Yeah.
From both sides, it was presented that this kit was first spotted in early 2025 when a customer of some unnamed commercial software vendor put parts of it into targeted operations. Then it resurfaced again later in the summer of 2025, I believe, in the waterhole attacks against the Ukrainian users. And then it hosted on a fake Ukrainian analytics domain. Can you walk me through, from your perspective, not the Google's thing, because they're separate. I want to treat from your visibility. When was there the first sign of this thing?
Yeah, for us, it actually happened way later than for Google. I would say something like early to mid-February, where we got the link and we started to investigate it.
This year.
I think it was
a month and a half ago. Yeah.
Yeah. When we wrote the report, we published our report a couple hours after Google. Once we saw that we were talking about the same thing, we were looking at the same thing, we also kind of had to publish this. And then we obviously try to already use their language and what they know about this and put it into our report as well.
And then there was a Chinese cryptocurrency finance website as well that was involved in it. The same kit appeared on this fake Chinese website, and with a final payload, according to my notes here, stealing crypto wallet credentials, scanning for photos, Apple Notes, and so on. You guys corroborated Google's findings, but then you went a little further, assessing that this framework has similarities to tools affiliated with the US government, and that's where it gets tricky for me. It's your press release calls out something affiliated with the US government and calling it the first observed mass exploitation of iPhones by a criminal group using nation-state grade capabilities. Can you help me understand your connection with US government there?
I personally can't go too much into detail on that because I just don't have a lot of insights. I'm based in Germany and Bonn. I've always worked on the defense side, but we have people in the companies that have been working on the offensive side in their previous work life, and that still have some government contacts or some insights. We also, from time to time, I have some friends in the offensive security world that are also iOS researchers, and then you do hear things and you do hear rumors. In that particular case, that link was more established from our co-founder, from my co-founder Rocky, who did work at the NSA in his previous life. But obviously, I don't think there will ever be any official recognition if this is US government or not, unless we finally see if Peter Williams actually did leak these capabilities to the Russians or not.
Well, that's a question. That's one of the things that's out there right now, that this is related to the L3 Trenchant, Peter Williams, the guy who just got sentenced, that there's some connection. Do you believe there's any connection there?
My gut tells me yes, because the timelines match. I don't think I've ever seen any framework or exploits which were so well engineered in the past. Even the famous NSO forced entry one with the like VM that were built in the exploit. This entire kit here is so well engineered that there's like probably years of like man hours which were spent into developing this entire framework. I would even say the framework itself is worth way more than the vulnerabilities itself. This is in that way the way how modular it is, how well it is engineered, it is very similar to triangulation. Even though I've never seen the code of triangulation, I've only seen the implants that Kaspersky released, but it's the same kind of bureaucratic development, very modular that governments really like to use when they have their exploits. It's not the kind of messy, hard commercial spyware, deliver something, drag money out of governance kind of stuff.
Right. Can you linger a little bit on the timeline that gives you that gut feeling? You said because of the timeline, you have a gut feeling that it's related. This is L3 Trenchant stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, the iOS vulnerabilities that we have here is like 17.2.1. You can also see that the build version for some of the implants ends with like 18.2, or like the SDK they build it for is 18.2. And if I recall it correctly, Peter did leak these exploits somewhere like last year, somewhere early 2025, which would pretty much fit into, let's say, chains which were public at this point in time for like 1773, which were disclosed, similar to that 18.2 is the build version. You can also see that the core framework itself, so like all the exploits, the core implant loader, they have an older build version, which is like iOS 16 even. While the modules clearly were built at a later stage with a completely different build environment.
So your gut is that this is L3 Trenchant code, and they're the surveillance vendor that like basically built this thing.
Yes, it's my gut. I don't have
No,
any
no,
hard
no.
link
Yeah.
that I can turn to.
I'm
this,
not putting you on the
think
spot.
it matches.
I'm not putting you on the spot to like definitively say it is. We're just kind of examining what your gut feeling is. The proliferation path is not quite clear. Do we have any clarity at all on how this exploit kit moved from a surveillance vendor customer to Russian espionage to Chinese cybercrime? Like, is there a suggestion there that there's a secondary market for exploit chains?
I think we have seen evidence of this actually a couple of times before. There was both the NSO group and the Intellexer like WebKit exploits, which were reused by the Russian government against like Mongolia. So that was like one of the first evidence that we've seen the same kind of exploits now being used as NDAs from other entities. And I think the zero-day broker, I don't know the name anymore. That is also now a little bit in the news. That
Operation Zero?
Yes.
The sanctioned guys, right?
Yeah, the ones that don't want to sell to like NATO countries, so they only want to sell to non-NATO countries. And I think they're like trying to fill a market gap in that way, which is for like second-day exploits or for people that want to move into this, while many other exploit vendors or companies are trying to move more closer to the Western NATO countries because they don't want to get punished in the ways that Intellexer got. So these are trying to fill the gap and just like getting stuff out there.
You mentioned triangulation and you had not seen the code. Is there an explanation for two of the exploits I believe mentioned here overlap with Operation Triangulation vulnerabilities? What's the connection? What's the connection at all, if any, in both reports?
Yeah, I think both Google and we don't really mention there is a solid connection. It's more like the same vulnerabilities that were also used by triangulation has been used by this kit as well. In that case, I think depending on the timeline, triangulation happened like 2023. This was potentially leaked in like 2025. So the triangulation vulnerabilities were massively discussed at this point in time. So people could have just like re-implemented them from public findings. There's jailbreaks that are using the same vulnerabilities. So this is more.
So it's not a solid straight line, right?
I wouldn't say so.
It's described in the reports as the first mass exploitation of iOS devices by a criminal group using nation-state tools. Is it really a first? And if it's the first, what does it really mean about the threat model of our iPhones?
I would say probably the first mass exploitation of like iPhones happened in 2019 when Google disclosed the campaign against the Uyghurs.
The Uyghur, that's the Uyghur thing, right?
Yeah, but this was from a nation-state actor Like it was, let's say, likely from China trying to target that specific group of people, and it was a rat. But this here is another Chinese actor, but they're just after cryptocurrency wallets. 18 different modules for all the different crypto wallets like MetaMask, Binance, Phantom, pretty much all the famous ones. And they're all targeted at exfiltrating data, passwords, recovery tokens from these particular specific wallets. They also have modules for Apple Notes where they're looking for passwords or potential like backup phrases. And they also have a module for Apple Photos where they look for like QR codes, which is all uploaded afterwards. There's other evidence that also shows that this is not like a nation state threat actor operating. It's more something like an organized crime group.
We're looking at documentation for 23 exploits covering iOS 13 through 17.2.1. What does the development cost and the timeline for something like that look like in your mind?
I think the exploits itself are probably something that are way cheaper to buy in that particular way, but the framework is the way it is engineered that allows you to like have different modules for all the exploits, like plugging in let's say a remote code execution for an iOS 15, combining this with a necessary sandbox escape or like kernel memory protection bypasses. This is what makes it actually very expensive. And then having an entire hooking framework that allows you to target, oh, now I want to attack Binance. And then this framework provides it with a way of like targeting specific functions or files inside there and just extracting it. Such a framework makes it very, very easy for even less technical people in order to get the job done. You don't have to be the famous iOS researcher or hacker right now to do this. You just need to have the framework and buy an exploit from the dark market to get support for it. Right.
You guys mentioned a WhatsApp module that was not in the Google report, and I'm just curious about what is your visibility into this entire thing? You guys were running parallel investigations, obviously. Can you give me a sense of how complete is your picture into what we're seeing?
Yeah, so I've took phones on 15, various versions of 16, 17, the version of 17 too, and I've basically infected all the phones and dumped the entire modules which were behind. We've also crawled the servers for additional modules. We figured out how they were naming specific schemes, and then we basically, I would say we dumped almost the entire thing. All the modules which are coming afterwards are explained in a config file, and the config file basically tells you this is the path where you can get the module for MetaMask. This is the path on the server for WhatsApp. So we just looked at the config file and then we crawled the server for the additional modules. There was not really a protection afterwards. Once you have figured out the entire URLs, you could have just built a crawler to just get this from the server.
One thing I couldn't not notice was that some have no CVEs and no listed fixes. Are these still 0 days? Has Apple been able to fully patch them? Do we know like why some of these pack bypass exploits aren't marked with CVEs?
That's a great question. It's probably a question that is more related to Google, because we only have this like kit or like access to this for the last couple of weeks. We started at mapping out what they're doing in terms of like how to like on the device itself, how can we detect this? What are IOCs? What are behaviors? How this entire thing actually looks like. And I think Google actually tried to do the entire like exploit analysis, figuring out if all of these were patched and mapping these to CVEs. Sometimes you don't always have the exact information, even if you have an exploit where something was patched. Let's say you have a PPR bypass form. It looks like it's in a chain for 17.1. If you would have to go and diff every single version of iOS to figure out when was the actual change happening that this was patched, I think this is just a very tedious job and it just takes some time. Obviously, Google has very smart people, especially in Project Zero, that know how to do this, but these are 23 different exploits. So at some point in time, you also might want to give up or you have other things to do.
Well, what does it say about our clarity in whether there were vulnerabilities that needed to be patched, whether they were patched, or some sort of clear documentation on it? And I might mention my iOS just shipped a new version just yesterday. I got a new version pushed to my phone yesterday. Is it connected at all to this? Do you know? Because there are no CVEs listed in the Apple bulletin for the new iOS point update that came out yesterday. So there's
Yeah,
No one knows if like stuff is patched, stuff is not patched. Like it just seems unclear to me.
yeah, from what I've seen in the past, sometimes Apple releases these and they start to, let's say, give the information if CVEs were like exploited in the wild, sometimes a little bit later, especially if they might have found it on their own. There's no guarantee for this. Sometimes there's also just bug fixes because something gets messed up, and Apple software is obviously not perfect, as we've seen with all the vulnerabilities, but we can also see it. Sometimes there's just nasty bugs which are patched, and then there's actually no CVE related to this. I don't have any more insights. I'm not aware of anything related to Coruna that was patched or could have been patched there. But I did look at the like diff between 26.3 and 26.3.1, and there's quite a lot of changes between the two versions. So there could be that there's additional security vulnerabilities or other things that have been patched, but we just don't have the insights yet.
This exploit kit is still a danger though to iPhone users, all iPhone users on all operating systems in your mind. This is not something that's been mitigated and everything has been patched and everything has been plugged. As of today, what do we know about like exposure to this thing?
Yeah, I think this, at least what we've seen so far, is very much really limited to the 13 to 17 to 1. But if you look at all the all the vulnerabilities that have been fixed in, say, the last 1.5 years, there's way more WebKit or even sandbox escapes that have been closed. Like just in iOS 26.2, Google Tag, by the way, also reported 2 vulnerabilities for WebKit. On 26.3, there was another one, which I think was related to a user space pack bypass. So there's more vulnerabilities which are out there, which were exploited in the wild, and they also might find their same way via the same exploit broker back to the hands of these criminals, and then they could also build modules for the same exploit framework and see if they can just extend it. There is possibility for this. There are some changes in iOS over the years that will make some of the exploit techniques harder, and then they would have to build like additional techniques for this. But a lot of the core engineering for such an exploit framework is already done for them. And by the way, it's done for anyone who captured now these entire chains. Because this is out, I don't think we're not going to get the rabbit back in the hole in that way.
The exploit kit, if I read it correctly, will bail out if lockdown mode is enabled. Is that accurate? And do you feel like that's some sort of validation for Apple's approach? You mentioned mitigations that are making these things a lot more difficult to fire. Lockdown mode is specifically built for that. What are your thoughts on lockdown mode on this exploit kit specifically?
It doesn't like prevent the entire exploit kit. It just, like a lot of the, let's say, remote code execution vulnerabilities just don't work with lockdown mode turned on. I think it's a great tool for attack surface reduction, but I don't think it's foolproof. Just because Apple is telling us they have never observed anyone bypassing lockdown mode.
Anyway, can I just get my little rant out of the way here? The fact that it doesn't mean anything. It just means that they've tested it and they've moved on to something else. In my mind, the idea that would lockdown mode have stopped this is just a dumb question. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, it's also, they're also telling us there is no mass exploitation of iPhones. And we clearly see there is a back market for iOS exploits. We see every once in a while there is new vulnerabilities which have been closed. There is a lot of vulnerabilities that come from third party, like people that are telling like, hey, this has been exploited. And there's probably way more that Apple has fixed over the years that they just don't report on. So I don't think the entire statement that iPhones are not attacked is just not true. But still, people that are targeted should use lockdown mode for attack surface reduction. But I also don't think, let's say, it's in the final thing is, I think Apple does a great job on terms of exploit mitigation and prevention, and they're really like accelerating the pace there. They do a very bad job on helping people detect these kind of things.
They haven't done a good job of like even advertising lockdown mode. Lockdown mode is still for like, a handful of people like you and I who have heard about it. I mean, my mom has never heard of lockdown mode. I've never seen an Apple ad campaign promoting lockdown mode. Lockdown mode is an admission that you can't secure this fancy thing that you built. So you have to remove all these features for it to work. So, I mean, the idea that lockdown mode is that's my little rant for the day. Tell me what happens next. Should we expect more of these kind of secondhand exploit kit proliferation? Like, where is this heading?
In the case of Coruna, like I said, I don't think we can contain this anymore. There's other criminal groups that are going to see maybe exploiting iPhones is not as difficult as we thought. And if they captured the exploits, they can also just host it themselves. So we might at some point in time see groups like Scattered Spider or other pieces are just trying to attack people on these older versions of iOS. But we also might see more exploits that are like end days being used against people. I mean, we have 5% of devices that are still like on iOS 17.2 and below. On a scale of 1 billion devices, these are 50 million potential iPhones that you can attack. If you look at iOS 18, you're even, I think, talking at 30 or 40%. So these are 400 million iPhones. There is a huge incentive in terms of just scale of potential devices that you can infect with these tools out there. So groups that already have massive smishing campaigns, phishing campaigns, or even like exploiting entire companies, they have the millions and the funds in order to buy the exploits and deploy this. And many other researchers have said it for years. It's a question of when and not if this is going to happen. And it's just now the first time that we have observed it in public.
One of my beefs with companies like yours and like Google that do this bits of research is that you guys never upload samples to VirusTotal or share samples. Like, help me understand your thinking around, I don't want to call it hoarding, but holding on to samples. And how does it help the rest of the ecosystem figure this out and build detections and build protection mechanisms? How do you think about sample sharing?
Oh, this is a great question. You're having me on the spot right now. I'm personally agreeing a lot with you here that sample sharing should be happening. I'm actually very glad that Google shared the like Predator sample from 2023. They've also, we've also seen a couple of older samples that have been shared on VirusTotal. In this particular case, let's say we're a little bit surprised that Google did publish this. So in that case, we also just don't have it totally figured out what we want to do in terms of sample sharing. There's always like this discussion between like, oh, if we're sharing the samples, we're actually benefiting the offensive side as well, which is the one that we want to defend. But I also see a huge need for the defensive side on like picking up.
So yeah, that's what I want to know. I just want to pick at your brain around the thinking. What are the risks of sample sharing? One is the one you just described. We educate the adversary a little more than we should be. That's probably fair in some instincts. Like, what other factor stops you from sharing samples?
I think in the past, a lot of the reasoning was actually trying to stop an attack like Coruna ever from happening, that you have organized crime groups that get the capability to actually deploy this to the masses, which is something that we've only seen on like desktop operating systems. Now, this might actually change the entire logic around this, because there might be now more and more people that are like groups that are picking this up and taking the iPhone as a new target. So actually, I think sample sharing and getting more people on investigation and analysis is super helpful. In this particular case, I think it's actually a little bit easier because there's some people that have already uploaded a captured part of the chains to like GitHub. So the samples are in that way available. And I think they even posted their link like publicly on Twitter or like X nowadays. So this is out in that way.
Yeah, but philosophically, we still have an issue, right? We still have a hiccup somewhere along the line where there's a lawyer or there's someone holding on to some competitive edge that feels like I need to hold on to these samples. Maybe, too, it could be victim exposure. There may be characteristics in a sample that exposes who the victim is, and there's some privacy implications there. But I can't shake the feeling that it's being held on to for commercial competitive interests and leaving the rest of the industry kind of, hanging around. Is that a fair assessment at all?
It's probably, it's a part that plays into this as well. By the way, we do, like, when we do training, we also do the training on, like, the Pegasus sample that we captured. It's, in that case, we're sharing the sample in the training. We've also shared some part of the samples with, like, friendly research partners, other organizations that we're working with. We're just not doing it necessarily publicly because I would also say we're trying to control this, who gets access to these particular things. But I do think there needs to be a change in the industry, and I'm definitely advocating for it.
Be the change, my friend.
Yeah, I'm also I can't do all the decisions and all the parts, and this is more my personal opinions and probably iVerify's opinion.
No, I don't mean to put you on the spot. It was just I just wanted to get a way, just an understanding of how you think about this, because you're not alone here. I mean, and everyone, it's not only in mobile world, every world, no one is sharing the goodies, right? Your sample is your goodie, and if it makes it onto Virus Total one day, it's a surprise, and it shouldn't be that way. It should be the other way around. I don't know.
Yeah, to be fair, I do think there's a slight change, that there's more happening, and I'm at least, I mean, I started in this world for iOS in 2022. And when I started, no one was sharing anything at all. And now I'm getting more and more, even government entities that are also like, let's say like, hey, we have a problem here. We need to find a solution. Let us see how we can collaborate and make some of these things that are happening. It's slow. It's picking up. I have hopes for the future. I haven't given up on this particular topic, that it's not going to get better. And I think on the macOS side, with Patrick Wardle's attempt on his iOS Mapper repository, we have good examples of how this could also leverage and funnel an entire thread into a community.
I think we're basically saying the same thing. I want to just double back on the Trenchant connection thing, that your gut feeling here. Here's the question, and forgive this conspiracy Ryan thinking, but here's the question. Is it possible for someone at Trenchant to look at your blog post and Google's blog post and say, damn, yes, that is ours?
Yes.
And if that is so, assuming they know and that is accurate, do you believe they have a responsibility as well to ship IOCs or to ship some sort of detection mechanisms for folks? Costin talked about it on the Three Body Problem podcast last week. That's this. So it's like if it's established that Peter Williams did sell these exploits that were eventually used in ransomware attacks against hospitals and healthcare institutions back in the United States and in the West, doesn't L3 have a responsibility? And in the same way here, if they can look at screenshots and documentation from you and Google and can actually recognize, holy moly, this is our stuff, do they have a responsibility to ship IOCs, you think?
I'd say probably there's a moral or ethical responsibility, or even in a public interest in the US into this, or even in the entire world to understand if this was coming from Trenchant and if it was this. But I would also guess that whoever their customer was, if it was coming from them, probably has them pretty much hands tied in contracts to make sure that this is not, because there's probably a government operation behind this, and these IOCs they would be sharing would potentially also allow all the other entities to figure out if they have been targeted by those operations or not. The IOCs that we shared for the kit are IOCs for both the export kit, but also the specific modules afterwards, and especially the thread names that are com.plasma. The entire framework is named around Plasma. So it's a Plasma core payload, Plasma loader, Plasma process injection. So whoever wrote this Plasma kit knows it's their stuff that has leaked with all the error codes and everything. So it's also these thread names and also the file names. They are very, very descriptive. So this is not the threat actor that came up, let's just rename everything to Plasma. So someone knows that this is theirs and that it leaked.
Of course. Last question, and it's a higher level question just to zoom all the way out. Do you have any confidence that a Pall Mall process helps to stop the proliferation of stuff like this? Because like you described, I mean, the biggest customer for this stuff are governments. Do we look to the policymakers for, I don't know.
That's a good question. We're part of the Pall Mall process as well, and I'm very much all forward for governments trying to come up with new regulation, or not even regulations, but trying to change this and trying to solve a problem. I'm not sure if a government process itself is going to help too much in a short-term period of time, just because it takes a very, very long road. Now, we're in the next part of the process. I think there's no vendor consultations that have been done. I've been a part with a couple of rounds where people exchange opinions. It's going to take a longer time until something happens. What I would probably say would help a lot more is the more detection capabilities we have for this on the technical side, the more we actually understand how large is this problem, the more public attention we have on this, the more other governments or other entities are also forced to do something. And it's probably everywhere. If we see there's a detection for malware, we can stop it. If we can make Apple basically do a better job at some part of the security, the more awareness we also get for people updating their phones, keeping everything secure. And also governments actually addressing some part of their
And just for the audience, are you an iPhone user yourself? Like, are
Yes.
you using iPhone as an everyday device with your banking apps and everything on it? So you're an iPhone
Yes, I
guy.
do. I probably shouldn't say for all the threat actors trying to target me as well.
I was gonna ask you. I was gonna ask you to give me, as an iPhone user, and just like you, give me the tips that you use to make sure your iPhone is as safe as it can be. Help the audience understand what they can do on older versions and on newer versions if there's anything that's different there.
Yeah, I'm definitely. I mean, restarting a phone helps getting rid of threat actors.
Just reboot every day. Are you a daily guy?
No, I'm not rebooting my phone daily. I do use our entire set of tools in all the advanced modes that is possible. I'm also collecting sysdiagnosis, backups, and all the other data very regular on my phone and inspecting it and running it like through our tooling. That's what it's made for. I would highly recommend to any targeted person, either you use a toolkit like ours or competitors that you actually can like continuously collect the data. So once you ever get a threat notification or you have an incident, you actually have the data to investigate. If you don't collect it, these threat actors are so good at cleanup, it's getting super, super hard to actually figure out that something was wrong at some point in time. If you don't want to use tools, sysdiagnosis health, crash logs, you can copy them with Finder, you can do backups, just do the data collection very regularly and keep it. I think Costin
You're
is
talking to
actually
a very
saying the
technical.
exact same thing.
You're talking to a very technical person who is capable of doing that. I'm talking. Let's just say a CEO. Just give me an everyday. Give me what an everyday user should do. Reboot your device, keep it up to date, and hope for the best. Turn on lockdown mode. I mean, there's not much more you can do, right?
I mean, in a way you can't. I mean, obviously we have a consumer version of our app that is helping some basic checking, and it also allows you to like add in data. If you don't want to use iVerify, you don't trust me or like our company, in that case, reboot your device every once in a while. Use lockdown mode if you feel that you're targeted, and then just never try to sideload anything on your phone, or even try to stay away from any weird SMS links that you're going to get in those cases. But if someone is really targeting you personally, there's no way you can protect from that right now.
Yeah.
This is just the reality. And there's no way that you can even detect it without any advanced tooling or any expert looking at this.
Right. I use your free app, the iVerify free version, and every Monday morning at 7 a.m. it reminds me to reboot my phone. And I think
This is actually
that
one of
might
the
be the
greatest
smartest
features
piece of the smartest feature on your app is that feature that reminds me once a week, just reboot this device, because it's the hardest thing for them to have is persistence, and this is how you kill persistence.
Yes.
Any closing words? Anything else that I missed that you wanted to amplify from the reports? Because I just got a chance to read them both last night in preparation for this podcast, and I'm sure I missed a million things.
I also think we haven't fully analyzed the entire thing yet. I mean, so many chains, so many implants. There's still a lot of work that is going to get in there, and I think this is going to keep us busy the entire year in a way. Not even us, just like the entire community. If you're on an older version of iOS, please update. If your phone doesn't get any updates anymore, it's time to buy a new one, even though it costs money. We've made our app free until May, so you don't have to pay even the like $1 for it. Use it. If you ever have the feeling that, or like if you get a threat notification, feel free to reach out to me or the company. We're very happy and trying to help, and we'll just try to find all the vulnerabilities as much as we can and get Apple to patch them. And maybe we even get a nice surprise in a security framework at some point in time.
Sounds good. And tell your friends to share some samples with the rest of us as well. Thank you, Matthias. Appreciate the time as well.
Thank you, Ryan.